Welcome back live, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm most definitely your host, Michael Jordan. I'm here with the rest of the Dream Team today. Next to me, as always, is Larry Bird. Say hi, Larry.
Wow, we're really getting out there, huh? Okay. We are Mythicist Milwaukee.
Also with us today is leading scorer Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And running the show, as always, Isaiah Thomas. Nice to be with you today, too, Isaiah.
I get to be Isaiah.
And please remember that our Dream Team has no magic. We are the leading secular team in Milwaukee. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm your host, Rob Moore, the Archbishop of Atheism. My cabinet members here with me include Minister of Mythicism, Brian Edwards. What's going on, Brian?
Nice. I'm doing well.
Also with us today, the Secretary of Skepticism, Megan Ivanyosh. She's looking at me crooked.
Impressive. Well, we all are.
As always, we are keeping the all-seeing eye of Horus on the secular movement with exciting guests from around the globe. If you like what we do, please support us at Patreon. You can sponsor up to as little as $1 a day or $1 a week or $1 a show. And it's a pledge kind of system, and you can support what we do and keep us going in the great direction that we're moving in.
That's right. And it neither supports Larry Bird nor Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, celebrity voices impersonated. Today we are very proud and happy to have with us, all the way from SoCal, it's Heina Dadabhoy. What's going on, Heina?
Nothing much. Just excited to be here.
She spent her childhood as a practicing Muslim who never in her right mind would have believed that she would grow up to be an atheist, feminist, secular humanist. The last guy, I watched one of your videos on the way up here, and the guy who introduced you in a way that made me believe that probably you might well be seen as the devil itself to a Muslim conservative.
Maybe. There are definitely worse agitators than me, but I guess I'm up there.
And you're a murtad. I learned a new word watching one of those things, a murtad, an apostate, which, as you say, is even worse than a non-believer in terms of chances of getting into Muslim heaven. What's that like?
Yeah, I'm pretty much guaranteed hell, according to Islamic law, because if you've never been a Muslim, there's a chance that God might look at you and say, "Oh, you just weren't educated correctly in Islam. You're still a decent person. You pass. You get to go to heaven." Or maybe you can go to hell for a little while, get the sins roasted off you, and then go to heaven. But as an apostate, I pretty much have no hope of redemption. So
let's get on that. I like that. I never realized that before. So in Islam, God might take pity on you for your ignorance, whereas in conservative Christianity, I don't think that's an excuse. I think you're going to hell whether you've heard of Jesus or not, if you don't believe.
Yeah, actually, as a Muslim, I found that out about Christianity. It actually kind of horrified me. I thought, well, what if you live in the middle of the jungle and you've never heard of Jesus? Well, too bad.
Yeah. That always struck me as a little cold, too. So there you go. I guess that Islam gets a notch up on Christianity today in my book. But tell us more about you. It says here that you spent your childhood in America. Were you born in America? And what is your actual ethnic background?
Well, I was born and raised in sunny Southern California, where I continue to live, just in a much better part of it. I was born and raised here. Ethnically, my family originally is from India, but comes by way of multiple countries. And when I was fairly young, my parents made a pretty conscious decision to raise me more as a Muslim than with any sort of cultural stuff. So we ate the food and we wore the clothes sometimes, but, people expect me to bust out with some kind of Bollywood number when I tell them I'm Indian. And I actually grew up watching absolutely no Bollywood because it was music and dancing and women in cropped shirts dancing in the rain. So that was sinful. So we didn't do any of that.
Right. And I think Muslims make up about, a 13% minority of Indians?
I'm sorry?
It's about, I think Islam is about 13% of all Indians. And it's a minority religion in India. Islam. Yeah, although in India there's enough people to where a minority religion is pretty big, 138 million.
But I think that people who realize that Pakistan used to be India and is now Muslim country don't realize that there are still a lot of Muslims in India. I think that's a common misconception among Americans who are generally culturally ignorant.
I mean, granted, there are parts of my family that did move to Pakistan, but we come by way of multiple countries.
So do you speak Urdu?
And understand it pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't really speak it. The language I can speak poorly, granted, is Gujarati, which is the language of Gujarat, which is a part of India.
Right. Although isn't the English the national language of India?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, colonization, I guess.
Yeah, they really got that right. Everybody does learn English. I didn't realize it was the national language. But yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So you describe yourself several different ways. What is the main thing? Is it ex-Muslims of North America? What's your real push? Tell us about what you're most active in and what you're about.
Well, mostly I just kind of do my thing. I mean, I'm affiliated with various groups and organizations. But yeah, no, I'm part of ex-Muslims in North America. I'm not really on the board or anything, but I'm a pretty vocal member and de facto sometimes representative of the group just because I'm loud and out there and doing stuff all the time. Yeah, mostly I'm a writer and an ex-Muslim, I would say, and that's what I focus on.
Right now, writing A Skeptic's Guide to Islam. Tell us about that.
Well, I crowdsourced funded it about 3 years ago before I was even, anything. No one really knew who I was, but it took off and it really helped to get me to where I am now. Thank you, backers, for your patience. It is indeed coming out in December. And it's been a work in progress over the past couple of years, and I, being naive and fairly good at writing, I thought it wouldn't take me very long, but the writing itself, as it turns out, doesn't take that long. What does take time is, figuring out where you stand, because as an ex-Muslim, I sort of gained an audience very quickly, far more quickly than I expected within the atheist and secular community. And so I started to feel more and more like I didn't do more harm than good. I wanted to make sure they understood that I was just one voice among many and that I wasn't some sort of authority or scholar or anything like that, just someone with a voice and a perspective. So that's been, that was somewhat challenging to realize, but it's been really rewarding. So I met a lot of interesting people, done a lot of cool stuff, and I think the book that's going to be coming out is something that I can be proud of for years to come.
We look forward to seeing that. And is there a bit of humor, a bit of any kind of a sarcastic take in there? Is it more technical? Give us a flavor.
Well, they're basically, it's a primer. It's a way for people to sort of read something and then they can start learning even more about Islam. But there is some sarcasm in there, not a whole lot. A lot of it is just sort of, this is what I was taught in Islam for what they are. It's almost like an extended frequently asked questions, just because as an atheist who is an ex-Muslim who's active in various communities, people tend to ask me the same questions over and over. And I remember thinking to myself once, I wish I could just hand them a book and say, here, read this. I'm tired of explaining this. As much as I love talking about Islam and stuff, some of the questions really do get sort of repetitive. Or they're too short to answer in a very restricted time frame. And so, I wish I had something to expand on it. So I'm writing, that's what I've written, is something that I can say. And for more information, you can look here. And yeah, so it's mostly informative in tone. I do have moments of incredulity and sarcasm and things like that, because there were things that even as a Muslim in Islam, the things really bothered me. And, I don't shy away from saying, holy shit, this is terrible. This is something that bothered me and has always bothered me and I think is a real problem.
You mentioned that there's a movement bubbling under the surface of Muslims online, especially, who are trying to be more progressive and trying to change Islam to be a little bit more liberal, a little bit more accepting. Is that something that you see coming to the surface as we go forward, or are people still really kind of scared to come out about it, and it's kind of kept in secret online and undercover?
Well, I definitely see changes from when I was a kid versus now. There were things that we thought were unthinkable or unspeakable that are getting huge coverage. There are Muslim bloggers who talk about these things. There are actual progressive movements that are being taken more seriously. There are people going back and viewing things a little more critically. And, instead of progressivism being defined as oh, you're a Muslim who ignores parts of their religion. There are people who sort of engage critically with parts of their religion and say, okay, this actually isn't our religion. What are we going to do with this? As opposed to saying, oh, let's ignore this part.
Right.
Which is really important, because I think there is this sort of tendency sometimes with religious people to say, oh, well, that's not really in there, but it is. And I think it's important to engage more honestly with it. And I do see more of that around me, and I'm very grateful for that. There's people who are truly engaged in reform and reconsideration of Islam. I mean, hats off to them. They're doing a far more difficult and sometimes far more dangerous job than I am.
Right. I think Irshad Manji is on the forefront of that. I've heard more of her probably than anyone else, and I think she's solid, right in the middle. I love listening to her. What are you kind of in line with what she's talking about? That she's definitely speaking to reform. She doesn't even claim atheism.
I'm sorry, you cut out there. What was the end of that? Sorry.
Oh, she doesn't claim atheism, but she's, I think, certainly leading the reform efforts, which are good. There's also a women's mosque out in L.A. that I read about as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of voices of reform. I mean, Irshad Manji, I read her book when I was still a Muslim because I read an article on this humorous Islamic website that was making fun of her. So I decided to go to the source and see what she had to say. And I mean, at the time, I thought, I sort of rolled my eyes at her because the whole premise of her progressivism is in the Quran, Allah said that He's created everything perfectly, and her reasoning is that, well, if He's created everything perfectly and He created me as a lesbian, lesbianism must be fine, despite everything else that Islam says. So, back then I thought it was sort of ridiculous what she was saying. Now I see her as, a valid progressive voice. Just, I don't know if her arguments really will convince a lot of Muslims, because most Muslims would say, well, Allah made you perfect and you screwed it up with the way you're acting.
Right.
Yeah. And I have heard of the women's mosque in LA, and that's something that's probably, going to help in a lot of ways. I definitely felt the need for women's only spaces when I was a Muslim, because, gosh, some of these quote unquote, modern or progressive or even, just generally gender integrated Muslim groups, there was a lot of tendencies for the men to take up the figurehead positions and the women to do all the actual work. And that always bothered me. If the person actually putting this magazine or event together is a sister rather than a brother, to use the Muslim words, but the brothers, are the ones with the names, the titles, the board memberships, and so on, that never seemed right to me. So I can see why there's a need for that sort of thing, for sure.
Definitely. I remember listening to your coming out story, and one of the things your parents did was to try to take you around to a number of Muslim scholars to try to get you back in and explain all the cognitive dissonance away. And as you were doing that, you would talk to these Muslim scholars that, because of the gender issues in Islam, wouldn't look you in the face while they're trying to convince you to come back. And I thought, wow.
Yeah, no, they were following modesty law, and, I wasn't going to force them. But, I mean, I remember what it was like to follow those rules. It was not easy. But yeah, they wouldn't look me in the eye, and I usually had to cover myself up for these interactions, even though at that point I had been deveiled for a while. And, these guys were saying all these incredible things as if I was a valuable asset to the Muslim Ummah or, Muslim global community. They were saying that, oh, the best people of faith come back from these sorts of doubts. They come back even stronger, and you're going to do great things for the Ummah. And I remember thinking, well, when I was a Muslim, none of you were saying any of this to me. None of you really appreciated this value that allegedly magically appeared as soon as I left. So, where were all of you praising my writing ability and my speaking ability? Because, all of this stuff that I do didn't come out of nowhere. I've always kind of been this way. But, I didn't get much praise from it outside of my immediate family and a few friends until I was an apostate. And then suddenly everyone wanted me to come back to Islam. And I bet you if I did come back, they would have slowly, started closing the gender rules back on me, and I would be married with children and sequestered away somewhere. So I didn't buy it for 1 minute is what I'm saying. I saw right through it.
Right. You'd have to fulfill your deen, right? What your obligations in life. And I think being a mother
deen is like a word. Partially, yes. It's. I know there's a saying that marriage is half of your deen.
Yes, I've heard that.
And that's for men and women. It's not supposed to be taken literally. I've been told this multiple times because people will say, "Oh, so the other half is everything else, and so everything else is trivial. Just get married." No, that's not how it works. But
you describe yourself.
Yeah, it was a thing that happened even when I was a Muslim. When I would have unhappy feelings about parts of my religion, I would bring them up to whoever was around me, and they would downplay parts of that religion, those parts of the religion rather. But when I wanted to do something that went against those very same things, then the same person would say to me, well, it's not right, it's not allowed. And the biggest example is really the gendered stuff where, sometimes I would have really upset moments where I'd say, oh, Islamically, I can't really do anything. I can't really follow my dreams and expand my horizons. And in order to keep me a Muslim, whoever I would say that to would say, that's not true. Islamically, you can, do all these things. And they would bring up examples of heroes in Muslim history who were women. But then if I actually wanted to go and do the things that I said I wanted to do, then they would say, oh, Islamically, that's not correct.
Yes. I often hear like the Quran and Islam it was so big for women's rights back in the day, but at the same time, they're touting it as almost this progressive feminism, but there's a lot of restrictions. So it's this constant contradiction.
Yeah, I mean, they say what they need to say so that they feel like the person who's listening will do or believe what they want them to do or believe. And this is, in various ideologies and so on. They do what they need to do to keep you in because the ultimate goal they have is to keep you in. And then after they already have you in, then they slowly try to manipulate you to get you to act the way they want you to act. It's whatever it takes, because they think that's the ultimate goal, is to keep you in and make you the best Muslim possible, so that way, you can go to heaven, which is the best thing. This life isn't even anything. It's all about the afterlife, we were told.
Do you find that your feminism is a better fit with the secular movement in general, or is there still some tension there in terms of sexism in our world as well? We see a pretty high level of achievement.
Well, I mean, when I first left Islam, a big part of what drove me to question Islam, it didn't make me leave Islam. The sexism wasn't enough to make me leave, but it definitely was the start of my questioning of the religion. And so when I left Islam, I had the perspective that sexism must originate in religion, that all sexism began and ended with religion. And so if I entered into exclusively, explicitly secular spaces, there was no reason for any of them to be sexist at all. And I found that that wasn't true. Sexism is really, I think, built into society. Whether or not it came from religion ultimately is a question that I don't know we can answer. But what we do know is that even secular spaces have aspects of sexism. And they're almost worse because these people are claiming that it's scientific to be sexist rather than religious. Because if today a religious man says to me, I need to be sexist to you because of my religion, I'm like, well, I don't believe in your religion, so you have no right to treat me in this way. But when someone's claiming it's evolution that's making them be sexist to me, what am I supposed to say other than you're probably wrong? It's tough. But I wouldn't, I will say that at least with secular groups, the bad science can be countered. The bad sociology especially can be countered as well. And at least we can have progress. Whereas with religions, you can't necessarily make that much progress because people are supposed to follow these rules that are figuratively and literally set in stone.
How has evolution been used to justify sexism? That's really interesting to me.
Oh, the whole, men are strong hunters and women are just gatherers who stay at home, and men's biological urges make them treat women crappily because that's just how that's the reproductive urge.
Okay.
Or things like that. Or men are more rational and women are more emotional because women have the babies, so you have to be emotional. Things like that, where people take their sexist notions and then find evidence and cherry pick it and interpret it in such a way to fit what they're saying.
Yeah, like stronger is being physically stronger somehow better. It makes you superior somehow. It's strange to me, but I know what you mean. We got a ways to go.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you thought about the comparisons of this secular atheist movement, or the kind of openly secular movement, when it's compared to the LGBT community movement that's going on now. What do you think about that? It's been compared to civil rights. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I try to be careful with such comparisons because, being an atheist, there are aspects of it that are marginalized by society, and we certainly have things that affect us because we are atheists. But it's a lot easier to hide who you are as an atheist than it is to hide who you are if you're LGBT. And a lot of us fall into both camps, and so Greta Christina actually gives a great. She's written this up, but she gives a great talk about what the atheist movement can learn from the LGBT movement and vice versa. And we're doing work connecting Creating Change, which is the big LGBT task force conference, with the more secular community. In fact, this year, a bunch of us went and really tried to get more secular presence there. But yeah, I would be really careful to sort of compare the oppressions, because I hear a lot of, the last remaining prejudice is against atheists, or, well, we're the most hated group in the United States. And it's based on a poll of who's considered to be electable as a president, not really necessarily day-to-day oppressions and aggressions and violence and suffering. So I do try to be careful about that. But yeah, I mean, it isn't that easy necessarily being an atheist, although it's definitely easier than being a visible Muslim. I'll tell you that.
That's interesting.
Go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah.
What was it like wearing a scarf post 9/11?
It was not fun. I mean, before 9/11, nobody knew what you were. They thought you were a cancer patient, or someone who just moved to the United States from Afghanistan and didn't know, quote unquote, you don't have to wear that here.
Okay.
People to you slowly as if you didn't understand English. Like, that was the experience pre 9/11. Post 9/11, everyone thought they knew what you were. And there was, saying Arab, go home, drunk people yelling Osama bin Laden at me out of their cars. Airports were not fun. That's putting it lightly. People just being more hostile. And, in order to get that level of hostility now, today, I'd have to probably, wear every feminist and atheist thing I own and go to like a really fundamentalist church. Like, that would be the only way to get that level of hate again. It's really difficult now to get that level. In fact, I, as an experiment, I jokingly said, all right, I've been visibly Muslim at an airport. Let me be visibly atheist. And I wore a bunch of atheist swag. And that was the first time in my life they didn't body scan me. They just waved me through the metal detector. And believe it or not, I thought that they had made a mistake. So I immediately took to social media, as you do, and I said, hey, guys, I think they forgot to body scan me or pat me down. They just put me through the metal detector. And every single one of my white friends, that's what we get every time. And I thought they had made a mistake. I thought everyone had to go through the body scan or the pat down, and it's not true.
Oh, right. So, agreed. So I think that's got to be a little bit from, if you rewind to World War II, the Japanese Americans get interned, but yet German Americans didn't. I think because you can tell the difference, the flavor of white from European, you really can't. And Islamic, although it's multiple races, the dress sometimes can give it away. And I think people they fear what they don't understand.
Exactly. But yeah, it's definitely, being an atheist is difficult in different ways, but everyday life is definitely a lot easier. And forget the hatred. What about things like dietary restrictions, or having to buy clothes? Buying clothes was hard. How did I find clothes that were modest but yet fit my budget and were not too weird? I didn't want to wear Arab or Pakistani clothing. I wanted to wear like American clothing, and that was difficult. Shaking men's hands. It was very awkward if a man extended his hand to shake my hand, and I had to awkwardly say, no, I can't do that. Daily life was difficult. I mean, granted, you could argue I had chosen it to some extent, and I guess to some extent I did. But yeah, I mean, it's really nice nowadays. Very simple things make me happy. because I don't have to worry about them. I can just do them.
So you were in a pretty strict version, because not every bit of Islam or the following different fiqhs forbids the shaking of hands between sexes. So you were in the ones that said no, you shouldn't do that.
Actually, it's pretty gender segregation. I mean, a lot of Muslims ignore the rules, but that one is pretty stock standard. The idea that you're not supposed to touch anyone of another gender who is not close to your family is pretty obvious in there. But yeah, plenty of Muslims ignore it. No question there.
Okay.
Plenty of Muslims just live their lives without adhering to the rules.
Yeah, you're educating me there. Okay, I literally thought it was just certain madhabs or certain fiqhs that required it. Okay.
Oh no, it's pretty stock standard there. But plenty of people in my family don't follow it, and that's how they live. So
that's something I was wondering. Are there people that are like American Christians that say they are, but go to church on Christmas and Easter, and that's it? Is there an equivalent?
Yeah, I call them non-practicing Muslims.
Okay.
They're Muslims who just sort of it's an identity for them. It's a feeling of community for them. They follow the parts that make sense for them in their lives, but they don't necessarily even bother to know everything that's in there. And they actually are the most trouble for me, even more, because the fundamentalist types, they'll try to argue with me, but then they realize what they're dealing with. But non-practicing Muslims will say things like, oh, you were too extreme as a Muslim, and now you're too extreme as an atheist. Or why couldn't you just, ignore parts of it and just say you follow it? Basically, they want me to be like them, and that's just never been my MO as a person. To me, ignoring certain parts of one's religion for one's convenience of life never stuck well with me, because if you actually believe in this God and this afterlife, then what are you doing just ignoring parts of it?
Yeah, you're getting an enormous amount of head nodding over here that you're not seeing. But yes, we
know what it's like to take grief from the fair weather Christians in this country. It's the same way.
And you seem like a person that, and I find this, that people aren't always willing to actually stand for something and stand behind it, even if it makes some people uncomfortable.
Yeah,
so that was a compliment.
For me, it was never about. Yeah, no, I get it. Thank you. I mean, although really, it's less for me about what's popular, unpopular. It's always been about just trying to have some integrity. To me, it's like, if you don't have that, what do you have as a person?
We're talking to Heina Dadabhoy. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee show. It's about 2:30. We want to remind everyone to get your tickets now for the Myth Information Conference, September 27th. It's coming up, just a few short weeks away, at the Milwaukee Holiday Inn Riverfront. That's $35 online, but $40 at the door, so make sure you get your tickets online. Kill a Priest, everybody. Unbelievably still to all of us, Kill a Priest starting to make headlines for coming to Milwaukee for his first lecture here at the only secular conference in Milwaukee. So get online now, mythicistmilwaukee.com, and make sure you like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. You can tweet us live here at mythicistmke with any questions that you have for guest Heina Dadabhoy. What else is going on out there? It's Southern California. It's a little bit earlier. You got you follow sports? You into football?
I guess I'm not really that big into sports, unfortunately. So
speaking of football and Ramadan, the fasting, and I believe that also applies to water. I mean, you could conceivably have dehydration injuries, especially in a place like SoCal. Do you see that at all? Is that an issue at all in the community?
Yeah, actually. I mean, I've never heard of anyone hurting themselves because, when I was in high school, I used to do PE even when I was fasting. And you're right, fasting does prohibit water as well from sunrise to sunset. So it was okay for me, though, because Islam is follows a lunar calendar. So every year, Ramadan moves up in the normal or the American calendar about 11 days. So when I was a kid, Ramadan was in winter. fall and winter. And so, it was not that long of a fast. And, I used to still do my PE class and everything, but I would, if we would run a mile, I would say, can I just do half a mile?
But if you can eat at night, is it really a fast?
They were really accommodating.
You could just eat at night, right?
After sunset, you can have as much food. There are people who do that. We didn't do that. We saw that as shameful. There are people who will, especially a lot of Arab countries, I noticed, they'll just sleep all day and party all night. And to us, that defeated the purpose. We believed that you had to sort of feel it, right? You're supposed to actually feel the fast and be awake for it. But there are plenty of people, who laze about all day and then party all night. And it actually leads to a marked decrease in productivity in those countries for the month of Ramadan.
Imagine that.
I saw on your blog, on Free Thought Blogs, that you have a hashtag called Haram Adan. Tell me about that and explain that to the folks that may not get it.
Oh my gosh. So this came out of the ex-Muslims group I'm a part of. It started off as kind of an inside joke, but we let it leak out because we found it way too hilarious. So the word haram in Arabic means forbidden. In Islam, it means something that's been prohibited by Allah according to your beliefs. I mean, people disagree on this stuff, of course. And Ramadan is, the month of fasting. So you mash them up and you've got Haramadan. And so we started posting pictures just privately to our secret group that you can't know about that we would post pictures of things like alcohol, or we would post about all the sex we had or things like that and say, this is why we'd post a picture of it and say, it's a Ramadan miracle. Just being really silly and tongue-in-cheek. And it sort of went out from there onto Twitter and Tumblr, where, those of us who were out and open and comfortable with sharing would post things that we did that were, against the rules of Ramadan, and they were Haramadan.
That's beautiful. I do like the pun.
Yeah, I'm a language guy, as many of us are, so that's not lost on us. Did they? Speaking of which, we touched on it before we got on the air. Did they call you Hyena a lot? Did you have to deal with really crazy nicknames with your name growing up?
Yeah, in kindergarten, and then it started up again when I joined the atheist community, and some people didn't like me, and so some of them they call me Heina Dadabhoy.
Oh, Dadabhoy! I didn't even think of that one. That's good.
Yeah, and I sort of chuckle to myself because you can't do better than my classmates in kindergarten.
Yes,
that's the best you've got.
Speaking of that daddy boy being a reasonable segue, you mentioned that coming out to your parents at 18 was very difficult, and that relations were getting better but are still strained. And I think that's one of the if we're going to talk about atheist discrimination, that's where it hurts the most, is sometimes the wedge between families. How is it going with your parents, say maybe it's just 8 or 9 years after?
Yeah, it's next spring it will be 10 years. So it's getting close to a decade. Things have gotten significantly better. They've learned a lot. I did sort of drop something on them that they never expected to happen to them and that they had never heard of before. We were taught that nobody leaves Islam except for maybe, paid Zionist agents trying to make Islam look bad. So it was not something that they had ever considered to be a possibility in future. They had talked to each other, my parents. I know that they had talked to each other when I was young about the possibility of me marrying somebody outside of the faith or the ethnicity. There are all kinds of worst case scenarios they had sort of discussed and considered, but not me leaving Islam. That was not something they would ever have guessed, especially not for me. I was the good kid. I was the one who tried to teach them about religion and tried to be more practicing than even them. So, it was shocking for them, and, people react to something that's shocking and that they don't expect, naturally with some degree of clumsiness or even callousness. But ultimately, and it's not like at 18 I was the best equipped to react to them well either. There were things that I did back then that had I come out yesterday, I would have done very differently. But in the end, we all learned from it. I think we're all better off for it. And yeah, there's some tension in that, we don't talk about religion and things like that. But I feel like that's pretty normal as an atheist. If you have religious parents, you illusion that maybe you shouldn't talk about religion and you should focus on the common ground that you have with them.
Do you, when you visit them, do they ask you, to attend service or attend mosque with them at all, or have you developed a true neutral zone where there's no discussion of religion?
Well, at first it was different. They would say things like you should, and well, first of all, I should emphasize that attending a mosque is not obligatory or even sometimes encouraged for Muslim women. So religiosity in Islam is less do you go to church and more do you do all these things that you're supposed to do personally.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's actually the only obligatory mosque is for men for Friday. So the Friday prayer is supposed to be obligatory on Muslim men.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, and obviously holidays, special occasions, funerals, and so on, people tend to go. But yeah, it's less of a mark of religiosity than, say, praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, as a woman covering up, and so on.
Is it just one mosque service on that Friday, or is it just like the midday service, or is it all 5?
It depends. If there's a robust local Muslim community, they'll have all 5 prayers available to Muslims. So you can pray alone, or you can pray in groups for those 5 times daily prayers. And for men especially, it's considered to be more, you get more reward from God for doing it in a group.
Gotcha.
So they'll usually have all 5 daily prayers in an area that has a pretty active local Muslim community, especially if they have a dedicated imam who they're paying to be basically the leader. He'll do all the prayers in the mosque. But, there won't be a whole lot of people who show up for, say, the dawn prayer. Most people are just going to pray it at home.
Now, are you out to your parents in the other ways, or is it one step at a time?
Officially, I'm only out as an atheist. And they do know about my husband. That was a pretty recent development, but that's been going pretty well, surprisingly. Well, maybe not surprisingly. He can be very charming. But there's a lot of things in my life that, if they Googled me, they could find out. But I've told them, don't look me up unless you're willing to deal with what you find.
So
like if we're really going to have a don't ask, don't tell relationship, stop asking Google. And I think for the most part, that's what they've been doing. They've just stopped looking, because I don't send them stuff that I do. I don't put it on the Facebook that they're friends with me on. So the only way they're to find it is either somebody sends it to them or they go looking for it. And I've warned them, you're not going to like what you're going to see, and it's going to just cause unnecessary problems. So why don't we just stay the way we are? And they've agreed, essentially, as far as I know. So
that's great.
I don't think you talked to us about how you actually came to go from Islam to atheism. What was that process like? Did you just wake up and were too intelligent to believe anymore, or?
Oh gosh, I'd like to think that even when I like to think that even when I was a believer, I was intelligent. So I'm going to say that for the record. I didn't suddenly get smarter or anything. It was really just tackling the cognitive dissonance. This is the short version, because I can go on for hours about my deconversion story. It was so much of my life. But yeah, I jokingly sometimes call it punctuated equilibrium, where there were big moments that caused an evolution in my thinking, but there were smaller things that happened in between. But yeah, it was definitely tackling the cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing every day about being a person of faith, living in this modern world and knowing everything that I knew. It didn't all exactly mesh together very well. And, you can compartmentalize it, you can justify it, you can rationalize it, you can not think about it as much as you want. But ultimately for me, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and couldn't stop realizing more and more how incompatible all these things were with each other. And I had to make a choice. And it wasn't exactly a choice in the sense that I got to choose which way I wanted to go. It was more that I just realized more and more until I made the choice to openly state how I thought and the changes in what I thought.
Did you consider holding it in and just not saying it, keeping it to yourself, and just kind of not practicing that way?
I thought about it, but honestly, with how visible of a practice the practice of Islam is, it would have been pretty much damn near impossible, especially since I was the most religious person in my family. If I had been a less religious person, I could have probably quietly retreated into quiet atheism and just, continue doing the few things that I did do, but Islam dominated my life 100%. And had I started retreating from my practice of religion, people would have noticed anyway. And they would have probably asked me what was going on and tried to help me, quote unquote, to get back to a state of practicing Islam more. There was no easy way for me.
No closet to hide in.
No, I had nowhere to go. And, I didn't want to keep wearing a headscarf when I was an atheist. I didn't want to have to pray and fast and, not date and not experience my life. I wanted to get on with my life as I felt I wanted it to be. And so the choice was either to continue living a giant lie and squandering away more years of my life doing something that I no longer thought was real or valid, or come out. I came out.
Was it real crazy getting drunk that first time?
It was actually a pretty bad experience. I was with someone who I thought was a friend, and he claimed like he knew all about drinking and how to do stuff, but it was really bad. It was a terrible night, actually. But it was a good lesson for me in that when I meet people who have left strict religions or backgrounds like I have, when they mention that they've never drank or smoked or whatever, and they want to have that first experience, I try to sort of good friend and facilitate their first experience in a healthy environment so that they don't have a horrible night like I did.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think even all Americans, just due to the high drinking age, binge drinking comes about by not being ever taught how to do this responsibly.
Yeah, and I've given a lot of friends their first alcohol drinking experience, and usually it's a nice selection of different things or whatever they're interested in trying, and me, not giving them a whole lot and them saying, I think I can have more. I'm like, you can have more later. There's always later. But, have your first experience, see where you end up, how you metabolize it and so on. Drink lots of water, your first time you do anything is you don't have to do everything all at once. And that's part of the sort of puritanical mentality that is in the U.S. that causes so many problems.
Invaluable party advice from Heina Dadabhoy. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee show, and it's time for a little feature we like to call Myth of the Day. Myth of the Day, of course, brought to you today by the Mythicist Milwaukee membership package, which we are selling at mythicistmilwaukee.com right now. $75 a year or $8 a month, $8 small dollars a month. And that comes with a ticket to the conference. Here now with Myth of the Day is Mythmeister Antonio. Take it away, Antonio.
Thank you, Heina Dadabhoy, for being our guest today. I'll begin first by thanking those groups that have either retweeted or favorited the tweet today, notifying your presence on the show today. Thank you to the Ex-Muslims Forum for favoriting the tweet today. Thank you to Atheist Strong for retweeting this. Thank you, Allie Jackson, the PR director for Atheist Republic, for retweeting your presence on the show today. Thank you, Rob Moore, who is on the show. Thank you, Miguel Connor. Thank you, PZ Myers, Tariq Musa,
Oscar speech,
Cale Jones, and James Kirk Wall. Thank you for retweeting and favoriting this episode today. Today's focus will be on Jesus in Islam. For many Christians, they are not aware that Jesus also exists in Islam, and he goes under the name of Isa. In Christianity, Jesus ascended into heaven and is seated in the right hand of God, judging the living and the dead in the eternal kingdom. These prophetic visions include the appearance of the whore of Babylon and the beasts, which align with the dragon, the devil, and persecute saints. Both beasts are defeated by Jesus and thrown in a lake of fire, culminating in the second coming of Jesus Christ, which will be instantaneous for all eyes to see and hear, will involve the resurrection of dead, and all with Jesus will be saved. Compared to the presence of Jesus, Isa, in Islam, Isa did not die, but ascended to Allah. On the day of resurrection, Isa himself will be a witness against Jews and Christians for believing in his death. He will fight for the cause of Islam. He will break the cross, kill pigs, and abolish the poll tax. Allah will destroy all religions except Islam. He, Isa, will destroy the evil one, Dajjal, an apocalyptic antichrist figure, and will live on the earth for 40 years, and then he will die. Muhammad actually means the praised one, and was a title, not a name. Muhammad, the title, was also applied to Jesus and other people. Jesus' true name, as we said, was Isa. His message was pure Islam, surrender to Allah. Like all the Muslim prophets before him, and like Muhammad after him, Isa was a lawgiver, and Christians should submit to his law. Like other messengers of Islam before him, Isa received his revelation of Islam in the form of a book. Isa's book is called the Injil, or Gospel. Isa's mother, Maryam, was the daughter of Imran. While still a virgin, Maryam gave birth to Isa alone in a desolate place under a date palm tree. Isa spoke while still a baby in his cradle. He performed various miracles, including breathing life into clay birds, raising the dead, healing the blind, and leopards. And that is your myth of the day.
Thank you, Antonio. The myth of Isa, common to both Abrahamic faiths, Christianity and Islam.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that,
That's
Brian?
true. Both. Well, there's three. I mean, I suppose not Judaism, but yeah, those two.
What did
Jesus is in there.
give us the your perspective as a believer growing up? What did they tell you about Jesus? Was it any kind of a thing at all?
Yeah, no, it was actually a big thing because living in a Christian-dominated country, people would see me as a Muslim and say, have you heard of Jesus? And I'd say, yes, I read about him in the Quran, actually. So it's this weird gotcha that Christians have. I feel like they love to say, have you heard of Jesus? And it's like, no, I've never heard of Jesus. I grew up under a rock. Of course I've heard of Jesus. You people keep coming to my door and knocking on it in the morning, right? And yeah, and I know what they and I know what they mean. They mean that have you accepted Christ as your Savior? No, never have, never will. But yeah, no, we definitely learned about all the prophets because reading fiction was sort of frowned upon growing up because it was kind of like a lie, we were taught. And so we would read a lot of Islamic stories. Like there's a lot of children's books of stories from the Quran and around Islam that have been adapted for children. So yeah, we read a lot of those. At least I did. So yeah.
Right. I like that some superstitions make the cut, others don't. And like the folks that are devout that says, well, I don't believe in any astrology. But yet the core tenets of the religion are somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just you can pick your superstition.
Are you a mythicist? Are you a person who believes that any of these figures actually existed in any kind of real world, or do you feel like most of us do that there's no evidence that Muhammad was even a real person, much less Jesus, Moses, and older figures?
I am. This is a very rare thing for me to say, but I'm fairly apathetic on that question because I don't think whether or not they existed really matters ultimately, in the sense that even if Muhammad existed, does that make Islam true? No. But I really enjoy watching other atheists debate the topic. It's one of my favorite things to do because it's, like I said, it's one of the few things where I'm fairly apathetic. So I like to watch people fight about something and learn. I usually learn a lot from those debates and fights. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think it matters all that much whether or not they existed. But it is interesting historically to figure out whether or not he did. I mean, I've heard some really compelling arguments that Muhammad was a figure made up by the Mecca Chamber of Commerce to get more pilgrims.
That's a good one. I thought about
that.
Yeah,
and there's, who knows? I don't know. I mean, maybe if we come up with time travel or something.
Yeah, the apathy is not uncommon. I think a lot of us have that feeling, and some of us are more atheist, and some of us more mythicist. But Brian's got some input here. Go ahead.
Well, no, Heina, if you enjoy, kind of sitting on the sidelines for that debate, but yet watching, the Mythicist Milwaukee team is on the way of arranging a debate between Bart Ehrman and Dr. Price. Robert Price. And
that's going to be good. Oh my gosh, I'm going to watch this.
Yeah, so you can, we'll be happy to allow you to watch that go on as it is. And whether or not you want to come here, which would be great, or possibly watch online, we definitely want you to come, though. That is going to be happening. So more details to come, but that's my teaser.
That's an exclusive announcement there. That was Pandora's box opening here. That really hasn't been announced yet, but apparently
That's
that is
great.
going to happen in 2016. So, yeah, we're all very excited about that.
Nice.
Definitely.
We got about 5 minutes left.
Definitely.
You want to concentrate on anything that you want to plug? The book we know about, which has a Kickstarter, right, still going that we can...
No, the Kickstarter was 3 years ago.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's been done for a while.
Tell us how we
So
can...
there's that. My next speaking gig is the 26th of September. I'm going to be doing the Bat Cruise in Austin.
Bat Cruise.
Cool.
I'm going to be the speaker for that. Yeah, I've always wanted to go to the Bat Cruise. I do love the adorable rodents that are winged of the night. So yeah, that's going to be cool. I haven't quite solidified exactly what my topic is going to be. Probably something to do with Islam, definitely, actually. So that's coming up. And yeah, I haven't been blogging quite as much lately because busy with finalizing my manuscript. But I should probably be blogging more again. I'm at Free Thought Blogs. My blog's called Heinous Dealings, freethoughtblogs.com/heinous. And yeah, now that I'm finally done with my manuscript after 3 years, I'll probably be coming up with all kinds of new projects, but, you know, one thing at a time.
That's cool. I enjoyed your accountability pledge too on your Free Thought blogs, and it's good that you're making an effort to take a solid centrist position and erring on the side of like opposing oppression. And I really especially liked your thought of I'm going to treat people based on who they are rather than what they've said about me, because of course we all have our critics and detractors, and that is an important point, and not get personal and not allow those criticisms to take personally. That was well worded.
Yeah, I mean, I always let myself take a step back when I read something that I think is going after me or something and say, all right, what is actually going on here? And even if the person didn't word it perfectly, what can I take from this? What is a good lesson for me here? And I think that's important because I don't want to end up calcified and, you know, one of those people that just sort of rests on their laurels. I want to have a lifetime of change and involvement.
Yeah, well said.
I wanted to ask before, and we still got a few more minutes. What are the more progressive Islamic countries in the world? We get this idea in America that every damn corner is a fundamentalist, scary scary place of horrors. But I mean, there's still West-friendly countries like where at least the government tries, like Turkey, I suppose. It's still, and Albania is a Muslim country. What are there, progressive Muslim countries, and is there a liberal edge out there anywhere?
I mean, I don't know if I can really classify any country wholly as one way or the other. I mean, I really liked going to Malaysia. Malaysia can be actually rough if you're a Malaysian-born Muslim because they put your religion on your passport, and if you try to leave it, they go after you. But if you're not a Muslim or you're a Muslim who's not born there, it's a pretty great place. It's pretty pluralistic. Muslims in India do tend to be more progressive as well. I mean, that's part of what being a minority does to you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think. What else? Yeah, you mentioned Turkey.
Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan can be. It depends a lot too on what you mean by progressive. Do you mean the government or the people, and things like that? But yeah, there are movements all over the world in pretty much every Muslim country to enact change, because a lot of the times, a lot of the citizens realize cynically and quite realistically that a lot of Islam being pushed by governments or other authoritarian religion through the lens of we want to control the people, and they're really starting to push back against that.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm old enough to remember a time pre-Ayatollah. There was a day when Tehran was a place you would visit. It was Western friendly and forward thinking, and a metropolitan city where you could enjoy tea on the street without fear of being blown up. So I remember the day, and it seemed like it all changed with Khomeini and the hostages in '79.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, we I guess we do what we can to spread the word, and the Secular Student Alliance has been a big help. I know you mentioned those guys. Is that a way for students who come from Muslim countries and get exposed and are able to maybe express their feelings a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. There's no question there.
We've had some come by a Saudi.
Yeah, I've met 5 different Saudi Arabian atheists. I mean, none of them can really be out, especially if you intend to travel back. But even in the most fundamentalist countries, there are those that don't, fall in the fold, but they're silent, completely in the closet because they have to be.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true.
So I think, yeah, one of the biggest things of progressivism is really just maybe trying to be out, being able to be out without real fear or reprisal.
Good deal. We're down under a minute. It's Kalaf Hamo Smoky next week. Back to the Yazidi, one of our pet topics, the embattled Yazidi people. So listen in next week, and remind everybody to look for a new episode of Holy Shit, our satirical video series, which is coming out today. Later today should be a new one up and available to check out. Thanks again to our guest today, Heina Dadabhoy. Any last words for us? Got about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Thanks for being with us, and stay on the line when we hang up, and or when we get off the air. We'll talk to you for a second.
Very good. Thanks so much for the time. It was fun.
Take it easy, everybody.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. Bye.